Hello everyone, it's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. Just today, California voted to ban the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035. And so one of the things that we worry about is the impact of all these EVs on the grid. And there's been a couple of articles and videos, and people talk about that a lot, about what the impact of the grid is. So I wanted to kind of do a sort of a deep dive into that. There's gonna be a lot of math in this video. It's very easy math. It's just arithmetic, multiplication. So it's not high level math or anything, but there's gonna be a lot of calculations. So try to stay with me, and hopefully it's fairly clear. Okay, so this is the article from CNBC, and so they're banning gas-powered vehicles starting in 2035. This will force automakers to speed up production of these vehicles. The policy will not ban people from owning and driving conventional vehicles or from selling them on the used market. So if you already have a gas-powered car, you can still drive it. It's not like you can't drive it after 2035. And you can still sell your gas-powered car as a used car to other Californians. It's fine. It's just new cars have to be EV or fuel cell or something like that. They can't be a traditional gas-powered car. All right, so let's do some calculations. Here's information talking about the number of registered vehicles in America. So in 2020, which is the year that we have the most information on, so this is in thousands of vehicles. And so this is 275,924,000 vehicles, which is basically 280 million vehicles. There's 280 million vehicles registered in the United States. I don't know if this includes motorcycles, but we'll just assume that this is all cars. So we'll assume there's 280 million cars registered in the United States. All right, so we need to know how much energy can the US generate. So in 2021, if you look at this graph, it's roughly, this is in millions of kilowatts. There is about 1,100 million kilowatts, which is a weird number. They should have made it billion kilowatts. So then it would be 1.1 billion kilowatts. Okay, so we'll go with that number. So the total energy generation capacity of the United States is 1.1 billion kilowatts. All right. So we got 280 million cars. We currently have the capacity for 1.1 billion kilowatts. Now is where the math starts. Let's assume that we have 280 million, so this is million, 280 million cars. We know that cars charge at 50 kilowatts. And that's like the low kilowatts. That's the slowest kind of DC charging. They can go up to 350 kilowatts. But let's just do 50 kilowatts. Let's say they are charging at 50 kilowatts. All right, this is how many kilowatts you need. You need 14 billion kilowatts. We currently generate 1.1 billion kilowatts. So minus that is 1.1 billion. So we need an extra 12.9 billion kilowatts if all the cars become electric, right? Now, let's do that in terms of nuclear power plants. Okay, nuclear power plant, this is from energy.gov. A nuclear power plant generates about 1 gigawatt of electricity. A gigawatt is a billion watts, which is a million kilowatts. So a million kilowatts. So each nuclear reactor is a million kilowatts. So let's divide this by a million. So we need 12,900 nuclear power plants. So we have to get there in 15 years, Well, actually, we have what? 13 years because it's 2022 and the cutoff is 2035. So in 13 years. So we divide it by 13. Oh, sorry, I multiplied it. Divide by 13 and then divide by, so we're dividing by 13. That is about 992 nuclear reactors per year divided by 365, so per day. So we have to build 2.7 nuclear reactors per day for the next 13 years. Okay, does that make sense? I hope everyone followed that. Now, that is crazy, right? We can't build 2.7 nuclear reactors per day for the next 13 years. And all of this data is 100% correct. That is how many cars there are, 280 million. This is our current generation capacity. That is how much electricity a nuclear reactor makes. However, the conclusion we ran into is completely wrong. It's so wrong. There is having all these cars convert to EV will not require us to build 2.7 nuclear reactors per day. That's just insanity. And the main, because this, if you guys followed along with the math, um, it it makes no sense because it's assuming that all 280 million cars are going to charge simultaneously and they'll do nothing but charge 24 hours a day and never drive. That they're just always charging and always sucking 50 kilowatts all the time. That's completely wrong. But you can see how someone running this calculation, especially if they were more articulate and more persuasive than I, could make this argument sound very, very good. Um, and you would come to this ridiculous conclusion that you have to build like three um, nuclear power plants a day. They may try to even make it look better and say, oh, we're going to use level 1 charging. Well, we're not going to do DC fast charging. We'll just say they pull 7 kilowatts instead of 50. They're just going to do level 2 charging. And then you only have to build half of one nuclear reactor every like 2 days or so, which sounds less ridiculous but kind of plausible. And people will think, well, this is the dumbest idea ever, moving to EVs, because there's no way we're going to build a nuclear power plant every 3 days. And we can't increase our electric capacity by more than an order of magnitude over the next decade. We can't make our energy production 10 times more than it is over the next 10, 20 years. It's just not practical. Okay, then what is the correct way to do this? Well, the correct way to do it is to figure out how many miles are driven by these cars. So let's see. This is information about the average the number of miles that American drivers drive per year. So, as a collective, right here it's highlighted, American drivers cover 3.2 trillion miles each year. Okay, that's a lot of driving. So let's do math again. So we're looking at 3200. Okay, that's thousand, million, billion, trillion. Okay, that's the number of miles that Americans drive per year. It's a lot. And then we see the how much electricity does it take to drive this number of miles. So let's look at our handy dandy charging spreadsheet that we made a little while ago. And here's the efficiency. So let's pick an average efficiency. So let's say 300, which is 300 watt hours per mile, which is 0.3 kilowatt hours per mile. Okay, so we're going to multiply this by 0.3 kilowatt hours. And this will tell us how many total kilowatt hours we need. So this is how much we need. We need 960 billion kilowatt hours. Now we look back at this. And so this is a graph showing how much instantaneous generation capacity do we have in the United States. at any instant, because this is power, not this is kilowatts, not kilowatt hours. So we want to know how much energy does the United States generate per year. So this is how many kilowatt hours it generates per year. About 4.2 trillion. So this is in billions of kilowatt hours. It takes 4.2 trillion kilowatt hours, right? This is almost 1 trillion kilowatt hours. So let's just round up to 1. So 1. So this would require capacity in the United States to go up by 1 trillion kilowatt hours. And we currently generate 4.2 trillion kilowatt hours. So that's an increase of a little less than 25%, a little less than a quarter. That is a significant amount of power generation we need to increase, but that is kind of doable. It's not an increase of 1,000%. It's not a tenfold increase. It's a 23% increase of generation over the next couple of years. Also, people just think, well, you're going to ban cars by 2035. Does that mean we're going to have 100% cars that are EV by 2035? No, of course not, because there's a bunch of cars still on the road. They're the cars that were sold in 2034 that are mostly gas. How fast are we converting over to EVs? So in 2022, at the start of 2022, 4.6% of all the cars sold in the US were EVs. That's a lot. It's nothing like Norway, where 86% were all electric. And then overall, I think, let's see, they talk about here. Currently, it's estimated that 1% of the, so this is a low estimate, it's actually 280, 1% are electric currently. And then if you look at projections for how long it would take for us to convert mostly to EVs. These are the projections. We don't know. It's hard to predict the future. But let's say that the slope of EV car sales looks like this, and then about by 2035, about 45% of new car sales in the country are EVs. That's fairly aggressive, but let's say that's the case. Then by 2050, about half the cars would be electric. If it was more aggressive, like this kind of slope, and you had 50% uptake by 2030, then you would expect about 2/3 of the cars to be electric by 2050. So we're probably not hitting 100% EVs, even in a fairly aggressive uptake, until most likely like 2070. 2070, that is about, almost 50 years away. Can we build an increase capacity of about 23% over the next 50 years? Very likely, yes. Very likely, yes. If you just look at the growth of renewable sources, and of course that's what's going to probably be the highest growth, you can see that there's been an increase of about 800% in the last 70 years in renewable growth. If you look at this, and a lot of people, they think that coal is still the dominant energy production source in the United States. That is not true. Coal is 21%. Natural gas is by far the most at 38%. So natural gas, then coal, then nuclear, and renewables currently are 21% of the total mix in the United States. In California, it's much higher. Renewables are much higher. In fact, in California, there are times when you generate too much power and they have to shut down the output because the solar capacity in California is generating way more power than the state can use. So they turn off significant power, usually in the month of April. Yeah, if you look at, let's see, I think there's a graph down here. Okay, yeah, look here. This is the amount of solar and wind power that they had to take offline. They shut it down. They shut down almost 200 gigawatt hours of renewable energy in California back in April of 2019 because it was way more power than the state could handle. They couldn't even export it. In fact, I think they were selling it for negative amounts of money. Like they were selling it to Arizona, like they were paying Arizona to take the energy, which is crazy. Um, and so you see every year it peaks out around April and then it drops down because well, this is the solar power generation. Oh, you can see here how much they take offline. So it peaks out here, and then of course they don't take things offline in the summer because in the summer California is hot and using a ton of AC, and then we use all the power we can generate. In fact, you around August, September is when there's sometimes not enough energy. The last time California had a big energy crisis was in 2020, and they had some rolling brownouts. They've made a bunch of moves to try to mitigate that. They're trying to aim for having about 22% above projected peak demand, but a couple of power plants are coming offline, so they're having a hard time meeting that goal of having a 22% buffer. So they do need to build more things, but the rise of rooftop solar in California is helping a lot. And rooftop solar is growing a lot in Texas and Florida as well. So rooftop solar, I don't know, is calculated. It's probably not calculated in this because most of rooftop solar basically gets used on site and is kind of invisible to the power plants and to the energy grid because it's used on site. Anyways, as you can see, if you do this correctly, if you do the math correctly, it's an increase of about 23%, and you're gonna need to build that over the next 50 years or so, which is doable. I mean, we are gonna have to increase power consumption. Now, it's interesting to run this calculation with the Aptera. It's very interesting. So let's go back. So we know there was 3.2 trillion, so that's billion, and then trillion. All right, then let's look at we use the average efficiency, which we said was 300. Let's use Aptera, which is 100. So we multiply this by zero point 0.1 kilowatt hours. This is how much we'll need. Instead of 1 trillion, it's 0.3 trillion. So it's a third. It's like a third. And so we would only have to increase our capacity not by 23%, but by 8%. It's infinitely doable. Now, also, that didn't even take into account the solar generation of the Aptera. Let's figure that out. You have 280 million. Let's make the crazy assumption that it's all Apteras. This is completely unrealistic, but let's go with it just for the sake of argument. So there's 280 million Apteras. Let's say that on average, they generate 20 miles of solar charging per day times 20, then times 365. We'll add the 0.25 because that's per year. This is how many free miles all these Aptera are generating. So 2 trillion miles. And then Americans drive 3.2 trillion. So therefore, you're going to you only need 1.2 trillion miles from the grid. It's billion, trillion. Then you multiply this by the efficiency of the Aptera. So that's how many kilowatt hours you need. So 120 billion. So 0.1 trillion kilowatt hours. So then you look at this, 0.1 trillion. That is a blip. That's almost zero impact. That's like I can't do the math in my head, but it's like less than 5% increase, like a 0.2% increase, 2% increase, 2% increase in power generation. That's all you need. Well, let's calculate it actually exactly. So let's see, 0.12 divided by 4.2. Yeah, 2.8%. So you have to increase energy generation by 2.8%. That's crazy. So if you converted all the cars in America today to Aptera, you would only have to increase energy generation by 2.8%. That means that you probably don't even need to bring more things online. The reason is one of the problems is like this article shows, there are times when we generate way more power than we need. And the problem is that renewable energies like solar generate a ton of power during the day and then they don't generate any power at night. And so if you had some batteries that could store the power when you have excess and then use it later, that would be really good. And potentially, if they ever got vehicle to grid working, if you had 280 million Aptera, and let's say everyone gets a 40 kilowatt hour pack times 40, this is how many kilowatt hours you have. 11.2 billion kilowatt hours of potential storage that the grid could use. And that is, you could store that every day, or renew that every day if you needed to. So that would obviate a lot of the energy needs because you could buffer out the swings in energy generation by wind and solar, which is sporadic power but generates a lot of power when it is available. And you may not even need to increase. You may not even need to build more power plants. So that's just the power of having a very efficient car that also generates solar. And if you could have vehicle to grid, it would say it would, and you made the grid smarter so they could use this vehicle to grid um, thing. And you could, you use it as a microgrid in your own house. If you had vehicle to home or something like that, if there were a rolling blackout, you could use your vehicle to power that. Anyways, you see that if you have a average efficiency vehicle, you need to generate about 23% more power to if all the EVs in America are converted to an average EV. If you have it converted to a Aptera, it's only 3%. That's huge. Okay, well, I hope that this made sense to you guys, and it was kind of interesting. I thought it was quite interesting when I read this article. That's kind of what I thought about, and I saw all these things about how EVs will cripple the grid and things like that. Um, as you can see, you can make it seem really bad by making some really bad assumptions that are not true, but you can use completely accurate data and just have one wrong assumption in your model, and it totally throws it off to some ridiculous conclusion. And so you have to be very careful of that and make sure that the calculations, that both the assumptions are correct and the underlying data is correct. And so you can have perfectly good data and just have one faulty assumption that throws off the model. You have to have both good assumptions of the model and good data, and then you can come to some reasonable conclusions. Okay, uh, if you've caught any errors in my math, please correct me below. And then I look forward to your comments. Thanks, as always, to our supporting members. And thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.